hello, and welcome to another episode of In Progress. I am your host, Julia Allen, and I'm super excited to be here today with Jacob Rundle and Joe Compton.
Hello.
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 Jacob is this wonderful voice in the indie community as far as having such a diverse blog of books that they talk about, and I was so happy to have you on there. They're also an author, but I'll let them introduce themselves if you want to go ahead and let people know who you are.
Oh, thank you, Julia. So yeah, as Julia said, my name is Jacob. I go by they, them. And you're absolutely right. I am an advocate for reading a lot of diverse books. Because I feel like, especially now in 2021, and also 2020, that is of utmost importance as of now, especially as a white book blogger, that we amplify and uplift, marginalized and BIPOC authors and voices. So I take pride in the fact that the majority of what I read, whether it's traditional or indie or self-published, is BIPOC authors. And so I'm, very proud of the fact that I do that.
So tell us a little bit about what you write personally, because I find it amazing that you have time to read at all. You are so busy. Every time I try to catch you and say hi, you've got a million things going on. So tell us a little bit about what you write.
So what I write is I write a lot of. I used to say that I was strictly a young adult author, but with the fact that now that I'm in grad school for Kidlit with Hamline University, I like to use the term that I'm a kidlit author because even in the short amount of time that I've been there, I've realized that one, how powerful writing is, but then especially in all genres, like picture books, middle grade, graphic novels, young adult. So and those are all areas I want to venture into, but what I mostly write right now is middle grade and young adult.
Wonderful. And you do mostly fantasy, is that right to say?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So fantasy is the genre that I typically gravitate towards. I've always been that kind of reader. I've always been an avid reader. I read, for my personal taste would be fantasy, but as a reviewer, I try to diversify what I read, try not to keep any, or trying to touch as many genres as I can, because I truly feel that even though I am a fantasy author, that even reading a nonfiction or a picture book, and as I've learned within my grad school program, that I have learned that a picture book actually will influence your writing, even if you are strictly a young adult author. So I feel like it's important to read all genres.
Yes, I love that, that motto of read widely. Don't just read what you write, but read all over the place. You learn so much from every different genre. It's really great.
Yeah, I had that experience. I had to read a women's lit book for one of the shows I was doing, and I was like, okay, women's lit. Am I really going to be able to get into this? Am I going to understand it? And surprisingly, it was like an eye opener. It was such an amazing experience. I think more people should venture outside of their comfort zone to read things that aren't comfortable with, because I think that you get a perspective that you may not realize that you might even be, perpetuating or giving off by just by happenstance. You may not even realize you're doing it, and you're not doing it maliciously or with intent, but you may still be doing something that is being talked about outside of who you are. And so it's like that perspective is so invaluable, because I felt like I had such a different take on myself after reading that book and experiencing that.
It's interesting that you say that, because it's a very I use a hot topic. I see it more. I just use the term loosely, but because it shouldn't be a hot topic, that's why I use the air quotes. Especially in the traditional publishing. I know we're talking about indie publishing, but it's all publishing, right? So we're all writers. We all have different paths to to get where we need to be. But we all are, masters of the word, right? The craft of the word. And when you say that, it's so true, because when you read something that is out of your own experience, you can only embrace it to a certain extent, especially like I was saying earlier in 2021, when you have certain individuals that are writing out of their own experience. That's when it becomes problematic. And as a writer, it's basically you want to ask yourself, who do you want to be? What kind of writer do you want to be? Do you want to be someone who diversifies their writing, who is inclusive, who is respectful, or do you want to be somebody who just doesn't care and just wants to write what they want to write? It's it's something that as an author and as a book reviewer I keep in mind, because like I said, as a white person, I can only understand to a certain extent. So when you read my reviews, there are a lot of white individuals. I would say I couldn't relate to the character, which I don't really believe, because while you can only understand to a certain extent, because you can only understand your own experience, but there's people are people, humans,
right?
Have empathy for somebody else. So when I see book reviewers say that, it's so disheartening, because I feel like they already had this idea, this notion before they start reading. And it's like, that isn't helping and uplifting a BIPOC or a marginalized author. You're actually hurting them. And, I won't go down that road of that, but I wish, more people would be willing to read outside of their own interest, because like I said, you will learn something from a woman's lit book. Maybe you can understand your own internal bias towards a female, or towards towards a woman, or a young lady, or a little girl, or just someone that isn't,
Well, that's what I love about reading, is that it teaches you empathy. It teaches you to put yourself in someone else's perspective and really like experience their life and like, what they go through on a daily basis. And like, that's how we widen our perspectives. For sure. So I wanted to ask, like, what got you into like book reviews and blogging?
So I've always been an avid reader. I mean, you asked my mom. I think it was. I've always been artistic. I've always been interested in storytelling, but honestly, it was more of growing up. It was a classic imposter syndrome, as we were talking about earlier. I didn't think I was good enough, and so instead of writing my own stuff, I put all my energy into reading. And I've always been someone who preferred stories by people that weren't of my own experience, because that's just what I gravitated towards. I love their stories, the cultures, the world building, the POVs, like everything. And so that's just how I, eventually got to the point, which I would say would be about 3 years ago, when I really start, actually it was when the same moment when I started writing is when I was like, I'm just going to start a blog just for fun. I'm not trying to make money off it. I love to read. And it wasn't until probably a year after I started my blog that I really gained a stronger understanding of, things going on, and seeing that, wow, there are only certain authors getting most of the blog posts. There's certain authors getting the blog tours. And it never sat right with me. And I was like, that's not. But there's like, I've read that story, and while it's good, but I don't understand why all these other authors aren't getting the same praise. There aren't blog tours, for BIPOC authors. And so I was like, so I wanted to do my part and just start blogging about that. And because again, like I had said, those are the stories I gravitated towards anyway. So it just kind of worked out.
And why do you think reviews are so important?
That's such an interesting question, because for the longest time I didn't think they were important, honestly. Because I didn't, I just started a blog and I just put some words on a blog post. And like, this is what I thought about it. And I didn't really care, or I didn't understand the implications of what a reviewer and the power a reviewer actually holds. And so it wasn't until later when I'm like, oh wow, like your words can actually affect somebody else. Like your words about any book. It's not just, you know, a book by a BIPOC author, but your review can actually persuade or actually deter someone from reading a book. And I was like, wow, you should, you know, that's, and I don't, it's not, you know, anything about ego, but it's, you really can affect somebody. And so that's why I took it a little more seriously. And to also go along with that, you know, the whole indie industry versus sub publishing versus traditional, you know, it's, I mean, that's a whole other conversation in itself, but I understand how difficult it is as a self-published and an indie author. And, you know, those voices also need to be elevated, and those voices need the blog posts and the tours and I wish the fancy trailers and the book deals and the movie and like all that stuff that could, you know, that traditional authors could be open to, because we all know that not every single traditional published author gets all of that.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Question.
Go ahead.
Do you find that more indie authors are approaching you to do blogging and book reviews than traditional ones, though? Are they? Is it a good mix, or do you find that indie authors are usually the ones that you gravitated towards in terms of like the book reviews and blogging?
I would say when I started, it was mostly indie, because I mean, I'm just going to keep it real. Traditional publishers, while they need bloggers, they have the budget for other avenues to market books. It wasn't until I started putting myself out there more, doing more like the blog tours, and also contacting publicists, you know, at publishers to kind of like throw my name in the hat, because again, there are thousands of bloggers, and it's an amazing thing to do, but at the same time, it's also exhausting because I don't know any bloggers that they don't get paid to do it. Like there are, I mean, we get a free book, which is great. I'm not sticking my nose about it. But it's out of labor of love that we do this. And so when I start contacting more publishers, like, hey, requesting certain arcs, like, hey, my name is this, these are my, you know, my blog stats, which again, that's another conversation. That's when I start getting the smaller publishers, which just because I say smaller publishers, and I'm not saying that they're not as effective or that they don't care about their authors as much. It's just the smaller ones reach out a little bit more. And then that's when at some point when Macmillan finally, I would have to say maybe a year ago, they're like, hey, you know, we see that you're requesting arcs a lot and you're doing blog posts. Like, do you want to join? It's like their blog, like the blogger list, which is great. You know, they send a list of books coming out within that year. You know, they break them up into certain like boxes based upon colors or just different themes. And they're like, hey, like, which one do you prefer? And then, you know, the point is to read and review and to promote. And so that, you know, that's when I would say, I mean, you know, it's a big break, but you know, that to me was really
that's when you made it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, as a blogger, like,
is there more pressure? Do you have more deadlines with a bigger publisher? Do they set you a deadline and say or I would imagine too, they have embargoes too, where you can't do a blog until the book is released kind of thing too, right?
Oh, for sure. So there are, so within this process, I thought it was really cool is even though like I'm a Marvel Comics fan, one of the publicists from DC reached out to me like, hey, kind of the same thing. Like we have all these graphic novels coming out. We see that you're a blogger. Would you want to be part of basically the same thing? They were a little more serious because like I had to re-sign it as like this consent form stating that, you know, you have to, like, when you receive when I receive a graphic novel, they give you like, you know, the info sheet and all that, like the release date, but it also gives you dates and times that you have to have your post up. You can't have it before this certain time, the certain date. And if you do, like, they could potentially take you off the list. So there is more pressure in the fact that, I mean, it's, you know, it's DC or it's Macmillan, but Macmillan, it's more of like, we would appreciate you to read and review them. Just send us the links when you do it. There, you know, there's less pressure on that because, again, they have, I'm sure, thousands of bloggers. They have all these authors that they're trying to get their books out there and market. So, I mean, there's still pressures because, like, I want to maintain, like, that relationship because, you know, as, you know, Julia knows me that, you know, at one point, one day, like, having a job within the publishing world would be something that I would want because that's just something I've always been interested in. So, but with indie authors, I mean, my name is on, like, IndieView and a couple of other websites, and I constantly get reviews, and I try to do as many as I can. And when I first started doing it, when my name was first on IndieView, I was literally getting thousands of requests every week.
Oh wow!
And which is great because I understand that you want your book reviewed. I totally get it because I'm in the same boat. And there have been a few instances where I'll tell an author, like, I'll try to have it done by this date. I would try. I don't promise anything that I can't fulfill. And they've actually, like, hey, like, it's this date, is it done? And I'm like, oh, it's not done yet, but it's in process. But there have also been other instances where some indie authors have been, I don't want to say overly demanding, but they get upset, like really upset when the review isn't done yet. And while I understand, like, I'm not getting paid to do it, and I'm doing it again in my free time because I have a full-time job. I have obligations outside of my job in my personal life.
Right.
And there's a global pandemic going on. So it's like, I wish certain individuals would be a little more understanding that when my book isn't done, maybe it's a day late. Well, I still try to get it done by the date that I say, as I stated, but it doesn't always happen. And maybe that's also on me because I don't have that added pressure of a publisher. Like, you need it done by, I don't know, 3 months from now. Well, and so there's been quite a few times when I'm like, you know what, maybe I should just stop reviewing for a while because there have been, like I said, instances where people get kind of nasty. And
that's too bad. Yeah, because you're, like, trying to help them out, and like the audacity.
And then on top of that, those are the jerks and the ones that don't share it or don't do anything with it after you're done with it. And it's like,
that's another conversation.
Yeah, right.
So it's like,
trust me, I feel your pain. I've been there so many times, and it's just like, I've had interviews that have gone south before and, like, really awful, and then they literally the day after they're bugging me about when it's going to air, and it's like, I got to get through this. I got to be in a state of mind to edit this thing because it's not good, and I have to figure out a way to make it good enough to put it out there, and that takes some time, and it's just like, you know, they don't understand that, and then I put it out there and I say, okay, it's out there, and they go, okay, good. So what ads are you running to put it out? I'm like, what are you talking about ads? You share it. That's how this works. You share it.
Right.
Yeah.
You share it. The people share it as well, and that's how this works.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend my own money. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. Again, there's a global pandemic. I'm very thankful.
There's a panorama going on, yes.
Panorama. That I'm very thankful that I've maintained my job this entire time. I'm very thankful of that. But I'm a social worker, so that job is extremely draining. And so when I have somebody reach out to me who I literally just spoke a week ago, hey, you posted your review on Amazon, but you didn't post it on Goodreads. I'm like, okay, well, give me a second. But we all know, in my opinion, that Goodreads is also problematic. And Goodreads is owned by Amazon. And so while you can post a review on Goodreads, Amazon might take your review down if it's not a verified review. So while I still post on Amazon, I just, because because I think I don't remember what term it was, but when my book came out, like the first time, one of my friends was like, "Hey, I can't review your book because I haven't spent a certain amount of money within the last, I don't know, 60 or 90 days." So I was like, okay. So while I obviously I buy books, but if I'm reviewing your book, there is a thing where, like I said, Amazon can take it down because it's not verified because I didn't purchase it. It's different if someone gifts it to you. I mean, I haven't run into a gift that Amazon has taken a review down, but I have run into where, hey, they're like, hey, like my review was gone. I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I feel bad, but I mean, I
You're not
don't
making the policies, yeah.
yeah, and I don't promise I'm going to buy your book, because I already have enough books, and on top of the ones I get from publishers. I mean, I hate saying it, but like I said, there are deadlines with those, and so it's like it's a give or take. And like I said, I try to do my best. I wish certain, I mean, not all. There are a lot of indie authors that are understanding that it'll be like 3 months until I get to some of them, and I'm like, I'm really sorry, but it's done. Here it is. And they're cool about it because we're in a panorama. So it's like,
right.
I mean, it's like,
well, the thing they don't understand is like your book's going to be there in perpetuity. So it's not like that month. That's the only month people are going to actually go and buy books. You're going to need some publicity 6 months down the road. It's probably even better that you have that publicity 6 months down the road because people have forgotten by now. They've moved on. So they don't see the brighter side of it sometimes, and that's kind of disheartening.
And that also goes along too with it's so difficult being. We all know that it's difficult being an indie author, and we do everything on ourselves unless you can afford a publicist, which I can't. I'm sure I could, but we're in a panorama, and it's either paying my rent or paying a publicist. I'm going to pay my rent. So I understand the thrill of writing a book and releasing a book, and I understand that. But if you're going to do it, I still feel like that is one area that you really have to study. You have to study marketing, ask questions. I know like Julia and I, a lot of times we've gone back and forth. She's given me ideas, and trust me, Julia, I've written them down. It's when I have a moment to actually, sit and and think about it and, stuff like that. But not everyone has that. Not everybody has like a connection or a friend who's also published. And so, they don't have somebody to talk about the marketing aspect, which is one of the most difficult parts of it, because as an indie author, we do everything. So you're right, Joe. So when my review comes out, like right around your release time, that's probably better than 3 months before it comes out. Because that's how the traditional.
Then you can say, "Here's a review of my book. Check it out. See what people think," and you can post about your book and build up buzz. Yeah.
And and that's why typically in the traditional publishing, a lot of the tours, they happen around release time, and that also helps create buzz. I mean, obviously, with other ways that you can do too besides blogging. But I wish people had a little more empathy during a panorama, because I feel like their stress level would also go down too, because then they're not biting their nails like, oh, why hasn't Jacob, like, am I the only blogger that you've asked? and not to mention too, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but when you send me, or you can go to my website because I have a contact me form, and you say, hey, review my book. I've had that happen a lot. I'm like, I'm not going to review your book by you stating review my book. It's called a review request for a reason. Just as a blogger, I have to request in a proper way to a publisher.
Yeah.
So if you go the traditional route, you have to query, which is a very formal way to do it, and it's formal, and you have to be careful on how you do it. You're not I see on Twitter all the time, a lot of agents, they will be like, I just received like this query saying, please review my book. And I'm like, if I was an agent, I would be like, decline too, because if you want something that badly, you're going to put the attention and detail in it. Because what it shows me is just if you don't take the time to do it to a book blogger, then are you saying, but you would do that with an agent? Are you saying that bloggers aren't as important as agents? Because there's a disconnect there. But I'm not saying that bloggers are these all powerful people, but like I said, we're all in this, battle together. We're all trying to get these books out. We're all trying to read them and help everybody, as many people as we can. But yeah, when I get those, I'm like, oh, I've had some doozies that they're like, oh, like I don't normally like someone like you to review my book, but can you review my book?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Like no. The backhanded insult. Yeah.
No. If you don't like this gay book blogger to review your story, I probably don't want to read it. And that's happened a lot.
Yeah, that guy's getting blocked and thrown in the trash immediately. I'm deleting that.
Right. Yeah.
That's the same guy. That's the same individual who came at me about not responding. I mean, this individual came at me like 3 times, like, hey, you said you were going to review it. I never said that. I just didn't respond to your email because you said you don't like my type of people. Then you also aren't going to like my type of book.
Unbelievable.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Some people that make the world go round these days. So what do you like when someone contacts you as an author? Like, what do you need to know from them? Like, obviously, hopefully they tell you a little bit about their book, but what other stuff do you like when someone contacts you?
So typically it does range. So when I get a request and it's like super, okay, I kind of think of it too in terms of if I was an agent and I was reading thousands of queries, right? Mm-hmm. So if a query is super long, it's going to take so much time to read it. And then it's going to affect you emotionally or even mentally, because it's like you're reading thousands of these things. Right. And if it's super long, it's like, oh, like what? I mean, just think of it if you were grading papers. If a teacher is grading a paper, like, oh, geez, like you wrote this much, but then you just need to write this much. Mm-hmm. So it's typically like a little, I call it a mini synopsis. You don't need to send me a 3-page synopsis. You really don't have to do that. You can just title, genre, because like I said, on my website, I say that, or I think it's IndieView, that I will review it doesn't matter, any genre. So like a mini synopsis, title, genre, and that's it, like that. Mm-hmm. But like I said, don't send me a demand, because that's going to be the fastest way that I just don't respond to your email. But I would say that's typical. I mean, again, it ranges. I do get some long synopses or basically a query letter, which is fine. But I just want the indie author to know what a query letter is actually used for. Maybe some book bloggers require it. I don't know, but I myself, I don't, because I don't want the author to add that much more pressure onto themselves when it's not necessary, because I feel like I'm super approachable. And even if you interact with me on Twitter, Facebook, and whatever, I mean, I've had people hit me up on Instagram. Hey, I see you're a reviewer. Do you want to talk about reviewing my book? Which is fine, but then I usually direct them to my website. Yeah, because I'm able to keep all of the contact forms together, so I don't lose any.
Right, you can keep track of stuff better that way.
So that's what I would say. Just mini synopsis, title, and genre.
Maybe release date.
Yeah, if it's something that they have an idea of when they want it or when they would like it done, that too.
But no demands. Yeah,
no demands. No. Please, no demands.
Satan. Yeah.
No exclamation points in your query letter or in your request, please.
Include the word "please" at least once, right?
Or like, because like I said, I don't know. Maybe it's Julie. You know me, so like I said, I go by they them. So sending me a request like, "Hey, dude," I'm like, ugh. You don't like. I'm not like a big stickler on it, but it's more of like, if you're going to enter this realm of creative expression, I should say, and you want your work to be out there, I still feel like do your due diligence, and you should
Look them up
be
on
more.
Twitter. See what their bio says. Yeah, because a lot of people include their pronouns in their bio.
Exactly.
I find dude not really that professional to begin with. You know, that's not
It's
really.
not.
You know,
Dorito, like, can you look at my book? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, bud.
Yeah, dude, man. Hey, bro. I'm like, what? Just, I've had some doozies that I won't repeat online, but if I made a collage, people would be like, and that's why sometimes, I will go on Twitter and I will get some messages from some authors, typically indie, that just they will say certain things, and I mean, I'm human. I am not, I'm imperfect. Like, no one's perfect, and so if you catch me on a bad day, and you're like, again, hey, even though I don't agree with your lifestyle, but can you review my book? I'm like, oh, it's like not the day,
right,
for you to say that. Like, because I don't understand why you feel like it's okay to superimpose your personal beliefs onto me when what I do, in my personal life, has nothing to do. Like, you don't know how I identify. You
like,
don't
I
know
wouldn't sell you a cake, but do me this favor.
Yeah, and I mean, there have been some times when there's some traditional published people that are not professional, but
yeah.
You don't have to answer this question if you don't want to. But have you ever gotten you're not going to review my book? Do you know who I am?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez.
I've got and.
I just love the reaction, just remembering in the moment. Yeah.
I just opened Pandora's box.
No, I'll answer it. I just won't say the name, but I don't care if you're Stephen King, or while I respect. I mean, I've only read like Carrie and Firestarter and Shine, like a few of his. I haven't read everything Stephen King's written, but your status doesn't mean anything to me. While I understand that, I'm a blogger, I'm down here, and you're a well-known. Even like there have been a few indie authors that think highly of themselves, and I pray for them and wish you good blessings, because at some point karma is going to come back into play. And you got to stay humble. But I have seen. Yes, I have. The fact that it's almost triggering a little bit.
Yeah.
but it is eye opening. And a few times it has happened. When in my earlier blogging days, I would kind of just like blow it off. But now it's not that I don't care. It's just that I'm doing it for fun. And especially
your mental well-being is more important than egos. Yeah.
Because I mean, wow, this could be like a huger topic. Because social media can be very toxic.
Right.
While it can be useful, if you're not careful, it can be toxic. And there have been times when there have been a few weeks when it was just like one after the next, and like where I feel like I can't say anything because this individual is traditionally published. And so you have to put on, your big pants, and is it worth it? Is it really worth potentially starting drama for no reason when, like I said, karma is going to come back into play?
Well, I feel like in this case, you are the karma because you're saying, no, I won't review you. No, I won't promote your book, so.
Yeah. But yes, I have. Do you know who I am? Yes, I do know who you are. And actually, your work isn't that good. So I'm not going to. Well, you probably don't want my kind to read your book anyway. So.
Right.
But stuff like that.
That makes my blood boil. Like, just.
It did at the time. It did, because I was like, I don't know. I was like I said, I don't care if you're Stephen King or, I'm not gonna mention some other. I'm trying to think of other big names. That's not J.K. Rowling, but we're not gonna talk about that. Because right now there's controversy with a lot of big names.
Yes. Well, I have a question for you because you are an author too. How does reviewing books, how does it influence your writing? And two, how do you find the time to do both?
So
let me just ask you the biggest questions ever, right?
Yeah. It's very difficult. There are a lot of sleepless nights, and that's that sounds dramatic, but the fact that now that I'm in grad school for Kid Lit, I'm forced to. Not forced to because I want to do it, but the tools that they're helping us, work on and use. It has actually helped me in my reading, because I used to just, I still read for fun, but I never paid attention to point of view or obviously world building has always been something I paid attention to, but representation, point of view, narrative style, is it verse or is it prose? Is it, and so grad school has really helped me hone in on that stuff, and it's helped me enjoy the story more. But as I stated earlier, while I've always enjoyed novels by BIPOC authors, this program has even exponentially increased my love for stories by authors or by BIPOC authors, is because you see the magic in the wording, their cultures, their languages, because keeping it real a lot, while I still read a lot of authors. It's just reading YA fantasy it's so oversaturated. And so it has gotten to the point now where a lot of the stories are very similar to me. And that tends to happen with authors that white authors. And so that's another reason why I read, stories by BIPOC authors, and because I just said, it's so rich. People that aren't white have had to fight for centuries for just existing, and that power and that love and that strength is in those stories. So that's why when I see other white or anyone or any blogger or reader or reviewer, whatever, they're talking bad about a story that's written by a BIPOC author, I just wish they would take that into consideration and step out of your own experience, and maybe you look through it with a different lens, and then maybe you would relate to that character more. No, as a white man or a white individual, I'm never going to know what it's like to be anything other than a white male presenting individual. That's just the truth. So when I read a story with a strong, sensitive, powerful, Black individual or a brown individual or an Asian individual, just whatever, there's just this magic, this power that I just don't get from white individual or white authors. And that isn't saying, like I said, I still read, the authors that I still love, but it's just my reviewing has really honed in on, like I said, the the perseverance, the power, the strength, the determination that all the BIPOC authors have to go through. And I wish people would just like think of that more than just saying, oh, well, that book was written by Angie Thomas, that I would never relate to that. I was like, have you read The Hate You Give? Have you read Concrete Rose? Like, those are some powerful stuff. Like, I've read them, and as a white individual, I've still learned from it.
Right.
I still learn, and to a certain extent. But if I can do it, why can't you? Like, why you?
Right.
But again, that is another conversation from. I hope I answered your question.
Well, how does reading other books, and especially like you said, you're in grad school, so you're learning how to like analyze and read differently. How does that influence your writing then?
So the one area that I've always been intrigued with is narrative voice.
Okay.
And so like when I wrote Augur of Shadows, which I do believe if I rewrote it now, it would be a completely different story, because it was just starting out. It was my first story. It was the first time I've ever written anything pushing past that imposter syndrome and just, just write it, Jacob. But within this program, it has made me really focus on the components that make up narrative voice. And within doing that, and also by reading what I've been reading and seeing the array of narrative voices, it has, in a way, kind of, for lack of a better term, calmed me down and not trying to sound so perfect, to just write how I want to write.
Right.
And with also the idea that your narrative voice will evolve over time. Because, because as authors, we all at some point have compared ourselves to other authors. I wish I would have written Carrie, or I wish I would have written, I don't know, even Harry Potter, but obviously from my point of view and not from from that person. But then I stopped doing that. I start seeing or truly understanding that my point of view is different than yours, and different than Joe's. And so the three of us could write the same story. Sorry, wrong air quotes. But the story would, sorry, I get too excited about this topic, but we could write the same story or with the same premise, but the story would
all be so different.
Stories. So the power of narrative voice is so ingrained in me now. So as I'm working on the creative project within this semester, because I have beta readers reading it as I'm going along, they're like, wow, this is completely different. I haven't read something like this from you before. I'm like, that's right, because I've calmed down. I'm not trying to sound like somebody else. I'm trying to sound like Jacob through this character. I'm trying to sound like Henry, or I'm trying to sound like Alec, who's in my story now. And also understanding that those characters are an aspect of me.
Right.
So a lot of people don't think of it that way. That yes, it is a different character, but it's still an aspect of you, because if it wasn't an aspect of you, then how could you write that story? Why are you writing that story? Are you doing it for clout? Are you just doing it so you could diversify your story? Or, it starts making you think of all the things that you put into your story. Is that necessary? Or are you writing a story that has all these wickets you're trying to hit? So your novel tries to stand out more than whatever book is out there. But all you have to do is write your own narrative voice. And trust me, it's not easy. I don't want it to come off that way, because it's a process for everybody. But when you start getting on the coattails of your, I'm just I haven't found my true voice yet, but I'm on my way to, and that's exciting, because within doing that, I start seeing how different I'm writing, and it really starts. It's that, that initial spark. It's back. I'm like, oh wow, that's really exciting. And so that's what blogging and reviewing has done, and that's what even the blog, just reading all the stuff that I've read, all of it every single thing helps. It all adds in, whether it's like, I don't know, using a certain word, or the way, the syntax of your sentence, or the choice of word, or I guess I just said that. Just again, just a different point of view. Experiment with point of view. I've started to really realize that first person is something that I gravitate towards, where it's so difficult for me to write in third person, but I haven't even tried second person. But at some point, I know that I want to, and it gives you the skills or that courage to do it, without thinking that the end result has to be something that's going to be published in a bookstore. So,
what are some things that you're doing to help you find your style?
So to go along with what I said, besides reading, like the Kidlit, I've also, it's more of just kind of finding, honestly, your inner child. And I think it's not okay to make kids as they grow up to think that you have to, like, oh, you're 18 now, you're an adult now, like your inner child has to be dead. You can't like video games, you can't play Magic the Gathering, you can't like comic books, like all those societal norms that they try to throw at everybody in all these different ways. I kind of said, screw it. I love to read comics. I love to watch Marvel movies, and especially WandaVision right now. And seeing that all that visual, representation in the story, in the emotion, it's like I'm a sponge. So I think we're all sponges as creative individuals. So you take a little bit with you, and it's not to copy. I'm not copying WandaVision. I'm just taking away. Like, exactly. Like, you really can have an emotional scene in your book, or it's okay to have a story that has a gay main character where the story isn't centered around trauma, or a BIPOC author story shouldn't have to be centered around trauma. Like, it's not okay that the industry, like, let's capitalize on people's trauma. Like, you are not helping in any way, shape, or form by, capitalizing on someone's trauma. Like, that's just not okay. That's never been okay. It should have never been okay. But so just taking in all my artistic, inspirations and embracing them, even at the age of 35, because I'm at the point now where I really don't care whether or not you like that I love to watch WandaVision. I don't really care. You're not paying my bills, so it's like that's my inspiration. Like, your inspiration could be, cooking, or Joe's could be, I don't know, like walking a dog or playing Magic the Gathering. Well, Magic the Gathering, in my opinion, has beautiful art on cards. It's fostering imagination and creativity. Like, why is society trying to water that down just so you can feel like you have to be a doctor, like you have to be a lawyer? Well, why can't that kid be an author or a painter, or go to art school? Like, there's this notion in society that art school is a waste of money. Well, just because you don't
consume art, though, so it is valuable.
Exactly. So you're willing to watch a movie or read a comic book or read a book or a graphic novel, but you're not okay with people going to school for it. So it seems kind of hypocritical to me.
Right.
So so taking in inspirations, but at the same time gaining that strength and that perseverance, like all of it, it comes together and it pushes you forward. And then just the more that you do it, the more you also learn about yourself. And I'm like, oh wow, that's my narrative voice. Or I'm on the way to finding my narrative voice, and also being okay with the fact that it might be when I'm like 50 when I truly find my true voice, but that's okay.
Right.
It's like these expectations that this industry, in any kind of artistic, avenue, that you just kind of have to try and push to the side, because,
when people ask me what my resolution was for the year, I'm like, I'm losing the weight of other people's expectations. Exactly.
And again, that could be another topic.
We do have a quick question from the audience I want to get to real quick. So the first book released some years ago to spark new interest. I'm animating the first book. Is this a good marketing path?
Ooh, that's interesting. It kind of honestly, it depends on how you market it.
Mhm.
So while it's a fantastic, I wish like Augur could, like we've also talked about this, Julie, how I feel like Augur would be a great graphic novel. It would be,
Mhm.
because there are some people that they love reading, but it's hard, and it's maybe not hard, but it's hard to maintain their attention. So they're more
Right.
visual people. I know there is it's a middle grade. It's I can't remember the author, but I know it's associated with Marvel because I think Stan Lee was associated with it. But it's this middle grade graphic novel mixture with like the Chinese zodiac, and I love it because on every other page someone illustrated the scene. And while I don't need that, for me personally, I still found it so cool because it kind of goes along with some people like, well, am I like imagining this thing correctly? But then maybe they need a little external validation because they see an illustration like, wow, like that's how I saw it. And so that in itself sparks more interest and keeps people engaged. So if you want to, you know, illustrate your first novel, I say go for it. I say don't ever let anybody stop you from whatever you want to try, because I bet you that if you throughout that process of illustrating your first novel, you're still going to learn something about yourself and your writing style, to where that can also help you with your further works.
Yeah, and there's an audience for everything. You can reach a completely new audience that way. What you have to think about with marketing is, how do I reach new people?
Yeah.
So that's the hard part. Yeah.
Josh in the chat mentioned that there's this whole Japanese light novels that do this all the time. So there is a marketplace out there for something like that. So there's a marketplace for everything, but you gotta find it. You gotta
yeah. And you also have to try so hard, because again, I know how difficult it is to those feelings of wanting to give up, because there are some days when you're like, wow, nobody wants to read my story, or it's been out for months and no one's buying it. I'm a failure. I'm the worst author. I'm here to tell you that it has nothing to do with the fact that someone might be an indie or self-pub author, because there are lots of traditionally published authors that their book doesn't do that well, or it's not that the book itself didn't do well, it's because of the marketing, like they didn't put enough money in it. And it's just, you have to like stay strong and stay with your conviction of, you believe in your story. Like if this is a story that you want to tell, then tell your story. But also by doing that, you still have to remember, just think of, I don't know, some people look at, what is that website? It's the publishing marketplace, I think. If you're able to like get into that website, I don't know, I've never tried, to see how sales go, what sells, whatever. If you want to go that route, that's fine. But I feel like this still kind of stifles creativity when you're trying to follow a trend versus writing the story that you want to write. But just don't give up, because not everyone has a number one bestseller the first time.
Yeah, and some books don't gain popularity till later, like much later. I hate this book, to be honest, but like The Great Gatsby wasn't super popular when it came out, but it became a classic much later. You know what I mean? So there are some books that just don't do well right away, but that doesn't mean they won't be discovered at some point too.
Yeah, and to go along with that, I think that's the whole instant gratification. Like we all want it. We all want that that orange banner on Amazon, and we want. When you look at the rankings, when you scroll down, you want to see number one in something, and I totally understand that, because that's kind of validation in itself, that wow, enough people want to read your work to get to that point. But where the challenge lies is when you don't hit those wickets, and if you don't get those, don't beat yourself up about it. Like when Augur released, I didn't get any of those, but while I'm a different person, but I know that the story that I wrote is the story that I wanted to be told. Because at the time, there's so few YA novels in the urban fantasy because I wrote, I can't remember, Julia, if this was like 3 or 4 years ago, when at that time, there were so few YA novels with gay protagonists that wasn't centered around trauma.
Right.
Which again, those stories have their place. And I'm not talking about stories that do center around trauma. If that's the story you want to tell, by all means, tell it. I'll still read it. I'll still buy it.
Right.
Because if you're part of the LGBT community, let's just face it. If you're part of a community, you're gonna go support those other authors. That's just maybe I'm just speaking for myself. But at the time, like I said, that was the story I wanted to tell because there's so few. Because it was like because I wasn't
wanted to tell a good story that happened to have a gay protagonist.
Exactly, and my coming out story is different than everyone else's. So I shouldn't write a story about a traumatic coming out story when that's not the experience I had. Mm-hmm. I had a very supportive family, which I know everyone does not have. Mm-hmm. But I would feel wrong to write a story where it's traumatic because I've never experienced that. I mean, I still have feelings of kind of like honing in and just like kind of acting like someone else around more people that weren't so accepting. I understand that feeling, but the whole like nervous to come out, I was like, no, my mom asked me, boom, I'm out. Like, that's just how it was. But
yeah. So to address this comment, I guess what are you doing to post about the books to bring up buzz to get people aware that you're doing these books and that they're coming out in this new format and like think about really how you're talking about the books and how you're making people aware of it. Visual posts always,
too. Think about who you're aiming at. If you're not aiming at that community that would appreciate that book, it's going to go on deaf ears. It's going to be one of those posts that just goes away. So if there's I'm sure there's plenty of groups out there that only love animated books or have graphic novels. There's tons of Facebook groups of graphic novels. Aim at those and see what you can do, and aim at bloggers and reviewers that do those reviews for you.
One thing I've recently discovered, which I did not know was the thing, was book talk. And so that is also another avenue to where you can reach out to. I mean, again, I don't know what their policies are, and this is more of a general statement. But if you think about it, if you reach out to a book blogger and they make a 60-second TikTok talking about your book, and that book gets, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of views,
right?
Like that, you know what I mean? Like that's another marketing area that you could look into. And but then with that, you have it also goes along with the aesthetic of the book. And that's why I've always been someone who does judge a book by its cover, because if I'm keeping it real with everybody, like if a book does not have a great cover, it's not going to grab my attention because that's just the type of person that I am. I'm not saying that your story is bad. I'm just saying it doesn't pull me in. So if you have a catchy, like really cool cover, which I understand that not everyone can afford it, but if you have a really cool cover that catches people's eye, and then you go to or even start your own book talk. No one says you have to. Everyone can do it, or reels on Instagram, like that. That's a new thing too. Like just do it. Just start doing it, and by interacting with other bloggers and other authors, the process hasn't really changed. It's just the fact that now there are other avenues that you can try. Again, don't beat yourself up. If like you do it, you put all this work into it, and then initially there's not as much payoff as you wanted, because that was your own perception of how the world would see it. But if you just kind of like don't really, just don't beat yourself up. But
20 books to 50K is a good Facebook group to check out too for more advertising ideas as well.
Yes, and it was too confusing for me. I tried.
There's a lot of info on there. There's a ton of info, but they can be really helpful. Yeah,
they really can, because they know groups. They know if you, I just don't have the brain power. I don't have the brain power for it. Like I know I'm at my limit. Yeah.
Well, it's been so great chatting with you. Do you have anything that you want to like shout out and promote, or let people know where they can find you online? Tell us about your website, and we'll run around with that for everyone real quick and wrap up.
Yeah, sure. So it's just jacobrundle.com. That's where I have a contact form, my blog, even my own work. But then just also Instagram, like jrundy85, or Twitter at jrundy08. I'm very approachable. You can send me a DM. As long as you don't demand anything, like I'm willing to talk to anybody. But shouting out, just keep writing your stories, and also when you're reading, just try to diversify your bookshelves, because that's so important now. And I'm telling you, even a story from a BIPOC author will teach you something, and it will better your own craft. So
that's great. And I am, as always, Julia. I write as J.K. Allen. My books are going to be re-releasing. I am in the middle of reworking them and doing new covers and stuff. And I will have a Halloween book coming out, so keep your eyes open for that, with my sister. Very excited. But you can find me at hijinkswriter.com. I also do author services such as editing and author coaching, so check me out. Joe, do you have anything you want to announce?
We're doing our new show on Friday night, me and Katie Solitis. We have information about Audiblegate, Bent Books, and I did something neat with a bunch of convention managers. So we'll talk a little bit about book conventions and when possibly they might be returning and what they might look like in the future. So check us out Friday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, for that show. And we have shows all week long. Like I mentioned, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we'll be releasing something new, whether it's live or not. So come and check us out. GoIndieNow. You're here, so you know how to find us. So keep us in mind. If you're new here, subscribe, like, comment. If you share, do all those wonderful things that you don't like to hear us talk about, but it's necessary. So I'm going to say it every time. But with that being said, that's all I've got. So.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for joining us. It was really great to have Jacob here with us tonight. And as always,
great conversation.
It's always time to go indie now. So we'll see you later.
Bye.